Neiman, Brian Wilson, Mary Catherine Ham, today's newsmakers, and you. The Morning Majority, 6:30.
WMAL. 7:07 on the Morning Majority. We've got Joe DiGenova, legal expert, here to talk to us, which is good. There was a huge Obamacare decision Friday. The 11th Circuit, I believe. How you doing, Joe?
Good morning, everybody. Doing great.
So, it's hard to keep track of all these Obamacare rulings. This one knocks down the mandate once again. What's our tally looking like, and what makes this decision different than others?
Well, the tally thus far is the one on Friday, 11th Circuit, strikes down the individual mandate, forcing people to buy insurance. The 6th Circuit, which came down 6 weeks ago, upholds the individual mandate, says it is constitutional, and we are, awaiting the 4th Circuit ruling, which should come any day. So right now it's 1-1 and one holding.
But this particular one was interesting, though, because there was a Democrat who decided to go against Obamacare, saying that the individual mandate is unconstitutional, right?
That is correct. That was Judge Frank Hull, who was nominated by Bill Clinton, who went along with the Chief Judge, Joel DiGenova, who was appointed by George H.W. Bush, and then the dissenter was Judge Stanley Marcus, who was appointed by Bill Clinton. By the way, Stan Marcus was U.S. Attorney when I was U.S. Attorney. He's a brilliant guy. He just happens to be wrong in this case.
Well, and some of the language sounded pretty harsh.
Yeah, this was a pretty tough case. This was about 300 pages of talking by judges. Most courts try to avoid opinions that long, but actually the court did a very valuable public service. The majority opinion published a whole series of examples of why the government could not impose a mandate on a human being who was a U.S. citizen, and it's a great historical read, and I recommend it to people. This is the case, filed by the 26 states that took place down in Florida, and this is the case in which Judge Vinson ruled that not only was the mandate unconstitutional, but that the whole law had to be struck down because there was no what we call severability clause in the law. In other words, that Congress had purposely failed to put a severability clause in, meaning you separate one section from another so that if you strike down one, it doesn't strike down the whole law. But these judges felt that the law could be sustained even without the individual mandate, which, as you know, is the funding mechanism for the statute. So without the individual mandate, there is no money to fund Obamacare other than what he stole from Medicare, which was $500 billion. So it's a very, very good ruling, and it's worth people taking a look at on the Internet.
So what does this mean as far as the Supreme Court is concerned? Is it
they're going to take it.
I know they're going to take it, but does it fast-track it anymore that this ruling went down?
The Supreme Court is going to take this. They're going to wait for the 4th Circuit. I doubt very much. They've already turned down a fast track once on Cuccinelli's lawsuit. They are going to wait. This is going to be what we call regular order. They're going to allow these things to evolve. They want a complete record so that they can take this thing head on. And, we all know it's going to be a 5-4 ruling in the Supreme Court, and it's going to be Kennedy who's going to be the deciding vote. Just like in gay marriage, he's going to be the deciding vote on the Prop 8 case out of California. So this is not going any faster than it already has.
Now, when the Supreme Court does decide on this case, they decide that the mandate is unconstitutional and that they take into account the severability clause, saying that the whole bill has to go. So there can't be two decisions where one they say the individual mandate is unconstitutional, but the law still stands?
Oh, they could say that, but I doubt that they will, because without a severability clause, and with the individual mandate being the sole funding mechanism theoretically for the entire rest of the statute, I don't see how you uphold the law. For example, the law requires insurance carriers to take all people, even with prior conditions, previous existing conditions. There has to be a way to pay for that. And if it isn't the insurance that all the people are forced to pay for or pay a fine for not buying it, then that means insurance premiums have to go up even more to pay for people who have pre-existing conditions. That's why this thing was such a nightmare to begin with, because it was a disastrous piece of public policy. The Supreme Court will decide both issues, and there's just no way, in my opinion, that this statute survives if they strike down the individual mandate.
Well, and the lack of severability clause, correct me if I'm wrong, was just a good old-fashioned boneheaded oversight by Democrats, correct?
Well, that's what they say. They say that the Senate forgot to put it in when it sent the final bill back to the House. There's also a whole group of people who quietly, you've seen some writing on this, that it was purposeful in order to make it more difficult to strike down the law, because the only thing that mattered to the Democrats was the individual mandate.
Right.
And, these power panels that are telling people what kind of treatment they're going to be able to receive. The reason for it doesn't matter. The fact is it's not in the statute, and it's a big deal that it's not in the statute, because rarely are significant laws passed that do not have severability clauses in them. Of course, when you don't know what's in the bill before you vote on it, sometimes
right. It happens.
You're going to miss a little detail like that.
Hey, let me ask you about this case in Aruba where you have some local people involved from Frederick, a 35-year-old Robin Gardner who's missing, presumed dead, and then Gary Giordano, who is the suspect there, the traveling companion. He's being held by Aruban authorities. His lawyer says there's no evidence to hold him. I'm just wondering, how long can they hold him? Can the FBI get involved? Should the FBI get involved at all, considering that you have an American who's a suspect and an American who's the victim here?
Well, the Aruban authorities have learned a valuable lesson from the Natalie Holloway case. They're being a little bit more aggressive than they might otherwise be. The fact that Giordano was an American citizen is irrelevant only for purposes of inquiries by the U.S. consulate. And the American government could, of course, make inquiries of the Aruban government. The FBI has no authority down there. They have no right to be there. If the Arubans want to invite them, they're certainly free to do so, and I'm sure the Bureau would be delighted to send somebody over from Miami for a couple of days of R&R. But doing something on the ground is going to be extremely difficult for the Bureau, although they can bring technical assistance and they can bring lab and scientific people. This is just another one of those awful cases where the Arubans are going to do the best they can with the limited resources that they have, and I don't know how much longer they're going to be able to hold Giordano without charging him. It looks as if the circumstances are extremely suspicious. Mm-hmm. His initial multiple explanations and different explanations initially are they're certainly tantalizing in terms of suspicion, but there is no evidence that he did anything to her other than the weird circumstances surrounding her disappearance. These cases are not easy. They're very difficult when you have no body and no witnesses. It's really tough.
Quick question. I noticed this about Rick Perry's announcement on Saturday, and you did too, that
Yes.
he mentioned that only 50% of Americans actually pay federal income taxes.
Yes.
What do you think about that message and how it might play?
Well, this is the elephant, that's not in the room.
Right.
I got to tell you something. We've been Victoria Fencing, my wife and I, have been waiting for the Republicans running for president to start talking about this. 50% of the American people don't pay taxes, and the president's talking about rich people have to pay their fair share. If he took all the money from the rich people, it wouldn't even make a dent in the $14 trillion debt. Of course, they wouldn't be working anymore, so there'd be no taxes the next year. But this 50% of the American people, you cannot have a public compact. You cannot have a constitutional democracy where 50% of the American people are on the dole. That's what it boils down to. They pay no taxes whatsoever. Well, guess what? They're going to continue to vote for people who don't want them to have taxes. And guess who that is? It's the Democratic Party. Now, people can like or dislike what we do with progressive income tax, but to have 50% of the American people not paying taxes and have the president screaming about people paying their fair share, talk about cognitive dissonance. I mean, this is ridiculous. And I think this is a big issue. I think people resent it, and they want people to start talking about it. This is going to be a gigantic issue, the election, and it shows me that Rick Perry knows where the president's stomach is and how to punch it. This guy is smart as a whip.
All right. Thank you, Joe. As always, we appreciate your insights.
Okay, guys.
Joe DiGenova, our legal expert, here with the